instance now, Mr. Lewin has directly interviewed him and then just told the jury what he thinks the interview means. That's what he said. He interpreted Mr. Durst's words. So in essence, he's vouching for his own position, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I don't see it as vouching at all. I do see that there's a fine line between stating that you intend to prove somebody's guilty of murder, which is fine, and stating that he killed somebody and describing how the person was killed, that's fine. There are certain other places, though, where an inference is drawn. He must have done this because of that. It's sort of the format, and it's a fine line. You go off script, you get carried away, and you pass that fine line, and you've done it several times. So I need you to be very careful, Mr. Lewin, not to argue in the opening. So yes, Mr.
Two other points,
yes.
Your Honor. Mr. Lewin made the following statement to the jury in his most recent opening. Kathy has never been seen since. Your Honor, we know that two people said that they saw her. Now, whether or not you're going to permit it into evidence is different than the prosecutor telling the jury that they've never been seen, because he knows that there were actual two people who said it. And what Mr. Lewin thinks about their credibility, whether they've recanted, any of that stuff, doesn't take away from the fact that Mr. Lewin is unequivocally telling this jury that nobody's seen her after that date, and therefore she was murdered in the South Salem house, when he knows that, in fact, there were two people who claimed they saw her.
Okay, your objection is overruled. Mr. Lewin is describing what the evidence will show. What you're describing is not evidence. I'm far from convinced that two people did see her. In fact, I'm convinced the opposite, but I'm not the finder of a reasonable doubt.
The other thing is,
yes.
Your Honor, he claims that in his opening, that the investigation in New York was subpar. I think that...
Yes, that was an argument, and it was, and the objection was sustained to that. Calling it subpar is a characterization. Now, saying there are other ways to go about it, it's a fine line, that's an argument.
Can I would just say that my memory of my statement was the evidence will show that the investigation was subpar. That's what the evidence will show. I mean, Your Honor, the evidence will show that the lead IO slept with a witness. I mean, that's what the evidence is going to be.
Very well. I mean, to me, I mean, I noticed that one. That wasn't the one that bothered me, really. But I do think that is fairly described as an argument. So that's just a fine line. Just shows you the fine line.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
I think it might call for an invited response, but I think the court would rule against us.
Oh, yes, I would. Now, the other is, I just think that before we have our jurors in here, that I want to describe that we did release a juror earlier today, and I did not cite law, and I always do, but it is misconduct to read or listen to media reports of a case. People versus Ramos, 34 Cal 3rd 494 514, and compounding that violation of the person's oath. When a person violates his or her oath as a juror, doubt is cast upon that person's ability to otherwise perform their duties. That's what Nestler holds, and in that case, the juror, as in this case, not only sought out and did read media information, but shared it with another juror, and that's exactly what happened here. So that's the reason why I did remove that juror from misconduct. Okay, can we get the jurors?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I think all our jurors are now present and seated. Mr. Durst is here, again assisted by our CART reporter. His lawyers are here. Lawyers for the people are present. And Mr. Lewin's about to resume his opening statement. Yes, you may.
All right, so what evidence was presented during the first 2 days of testimony prior to the adjournment? You heard from Dr. Marvin Karp, who lived next door to Susan. He testified, and he's immediately next door. You saw the layout that on December 23rd of 2000, between 9 and 9:30, he saw two of Susan's dogs running around his front yard. He said that it was strange that I would find them running around. I never saw them out on the street. I never saw them anywhere out away from the house. You heard from Sandra Garfield. She lived at 1441 Benedict Canyon. And she testified she did not know Susan. She said that later that same morning on the 23rd, what she later learned was Susan's dog Lulu wandered into her house. She said that on December 24th, she knocked on Susan's door multiple times, and at least 2 dogs bigger than Lulu she could see through the window, and they were wildly jumping up and down and barking. You heard from Catherine Cutter. She lived also next door on the other side of Susan at 1531. She was again Susan's immediate next door neighbor. You can see again Susan is in the middle between Karp and Cutter. She talked about the dogs. She said, I knew she kept their leashes on them when they were in the house, but I never saw her out of the house with the dogs. I never saw her walk them or take them out, ever. And she lives immediately next door. She said that on December 24th, while she was in her own backyard, she looked into Susan's backyard and she saw that her back door was wide open. She said she is the one who called 911, and you heard her statement. You heard the direct from LAP Officer Rashad Sharif. He talked about the crime scene. He talked about the fact that they did a complete search. They found only one casing. He said that there was, in essence, no evidence of any burglary or robbery, etc. You heard from Thomas Durst, who is Bob Durst's youngest brother. And what did he tell you?
On a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being the cheapest person you ever met, and 100 being the most generous, based on your experience growing up and knowing your brother, how would you rate your brother?
About -50. I believe about -50 if the scale goes that low.
-50.
He talked about a trip when Bob and Kathy had visited him in San Francisco, and they had a terrible fight. He said Kathy was so panicked that she literally left the apartment through the fire escape.
I want to go fast forward to December of 1981. Do you recall being in New York City?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall going over to 37 Riverside Drive?
This is the case. I don't remember the address, but I did go to their Riverside Drive apartment. They had a penthouse, which they were very proud of.
And when you got there, can you please describe what happened? Let me put this up, People's 13. Does this look like the penthouse that you went and visited?
I went at night, so I was invited to dinner.
I can put my hand over and make it darker.
All right.
Did that help? No.
So I went at night, and I went there. And it was a very fancy building, had a doorman, I believe. And I arrived, and I rang the bell, and Kathy opens the door, and she's in a very sexy nightgown, it was flimsy, and I thought I'm in the wrong building, I shouldn't be here. And then Bob comes behind her and starts lifting up the back of the nightgown, and she says, "Robert!" And then he does it again, and I just turned around and left. This wasn't dinner, this was something else.
Let me ask you, what was Kathy's response when he lifted up? Was that done in front of you?
Yeah.
And did Kathy appear to be, for lack of a better term, in on the joke or in on what was going on?
There was no joke going on. It was something, it was a power trip of some sort. And why she was in a nightgown, I don't know.
And did he do it more than once?
Yes, sir.
And what was his demeanor while he was doing that?
He enjoyed it.
And you said you were uncomfortable, you turned around and left.
Yes.
Did Kathy seem to enjoy it?
No.
And how sure are you of that?
150% sure.
He discussed that same 1981 trip in more detail.
During this same trip, did you have a confrontation with your brother Bob?
I had a serious confrontation with him, but it happened in 1982 on a trip in April.
Can you describe what that confrontation was about?
Yes, it was about Kathy. Now, as you know, Kathy was missing by that time. I use the term missing. And Robert Durst came up to me, and these are the words he said. He said it, I know she asked you for money, but that's not the meaning that he put on it. He said it like this. I know she asked you for money!
Mr. Durst, when he said that, how did you take that?
I felt like I was about to die.
You also heard from Ann Anderson Doyle. She lived next door to Riverside Drive in the adjoining penthouse with her husband, Kevin.
I wanted you to discuss for the jury what was Kathy's demeanor like, the times where she would come over when she was at her high level of distress. What was her demeanor like? Physically, what did she look like?
Oh, when she was in those acute stress modes, she would be, she would come over in her, in her pajamas or in her whatever loungewear or underwear, whatever you call it, and she would be disheveled. It would be a little bit like a stray dog that would come out of the rain, and she would just want to get away, and I would say it would have been hugely embarrassing for her, but she probably felt that she had to, she felt that she could trust me and that I would let her in, and we would talk to each other.
In describing her physical appearance when she came over, physical demeanor, have you previously...
Well, she was very cowering, and she would be... hair would be disheveled, she'd be crying, she'd be shaking, she'd be a complete mess, basically, and,
When you used the word cowering just now for the jury, you kind of took your shoulders and rolled them in and brought your arms close to your chest as if hunched over. Describe what you're trying to describe. How would she physically look? Would she actually be doing that, being hunched over like that?
yeah, because that's like when you're afraid or when you're being, attacked kind of thing, you cower, you hold yourself like this. I mean, it's a natural reaction that humans do.
And, Your Honor, when she said that, she had both her arms crossed across her chest, holding her shoulders as if kind of grasping herself or hugging herself as hunched over with her shoulders.
The record shows so respect.
Thank you. But aside from being kind of cowered over and hunched over in that manner you described, you also said the word shaking. Would she physically be shaking?
Yeah, absolutely. Physically shaking, scared, frightened, really terrorized.
Would she be crying?
Crying.
How bad?
How bad?
Would she be crying?
Well, usually she'd cry and sob more after she would come inside and calm down. She would really sob and cry. But I guess, yeah.
She was asked if Kathy ever used the front door instead of going through the window when she would come over.
Did she ever come over and visit you through your front door?
Not that I remember now.
So are you saying every time Kathy would come over and interact with you, it would always be across this terrace, across whatever barrier there was, to your back window door, or window, whatever it was?
Yeah.
She was asked to describe what Kathy would tell her was going on.
So I want you to tell the jury, what would she tell you? What was she escaping from?
Well, she was escaping from a very emotionally abusive relationship, and she was, when she was afraid, she would come over to my house, and sometimes she wouldn't even sit where any. I had one room in the house, which was the bathroom, which only had a window seeing downtown, but it didn't have a terrace around it. So you could go into the bathroom and close the door, and nobody could see you from the outside of the terrace. So she would want to sit in that room because she didn't want anybody to come on the terrace and see that she was in there with me.
Well, when you say she didn't want anyone to see, did she tell you who she didn't want to see?
Well, her husband, yeah.
Are we talking about Robert Durst?
Yes.
What types of what you describe as emotional abuse would she tell you that her husband had just said or done to her prior to running over to you to seek shelter?
Well, he would call her words and names and demean her and, not support her and.
What words did he call her that you remember?
Well, he would just call her evidence.
Did she talk to you? You mentioned medicine. Did she talk to you about what he was telling her about her desire to be a doctor?
No, we didn't really have. It wasn't so much talk about the circumstances in their life. It was more, every time I spoke to her, it was more an emergency situation. So I can't say I knew anything about her or them or anything. I didn't know who he was. I knew that they had a house upstate New York, but that's all I knew.
Did she ever tell you that he'd just been physically violent with her?
Yeah, she would tell me, because otherwise she wouldn't be coming to me, because she came to me because she was afraid.
Okay. Did she ever tell you that he'd ever threatened her?
I remember she was saying, this is when she was really upset that time, and they had a massive fight because he wanted her to sign some paper saying that she wouldn't get any money or any property or something like that. And I thought that was another way of frightening. That's another, if you leave me, you're just going to have nothing. You'll be nobody. You're not going to have anything. So.
And she told you he wanted her to sign something?
He wanted her to sign something, and she wouldn't do it. Yeah.
What type of thing did he want her to sign?
Well, like some kind of paper saying that she didn't claim any monies for, so that it was after they got off, if she left him, basically.
So, were there multiple occasions where she told you he had been violent with her?
Multiple occasions, yes.
You just can't say how many?
No.
So when you pause, you're just trying to think of how many occasions, not whether it happened.
No, I know it happened, but I just can't say, it happened 5 times or 10 times. It was, it's 38 years ago, so I can't remember exactly, how many times, but I know that she was terrified of him, so, and that wasn't just emotional abuse, so.
So please tell us, what is it that you recall that happened in September or October of 1985?
What I can remember is that she came across to my...
She being?
Kathleen came across, and it was... She was knocking on my door, my window door, and she was just, it was late, and I think that, it was one of those things that had always stuck in my mind, as if that little match girl, she was just sitting on the stairs, kind of shaking and crying, and it was really upsetting, and And then she didn't want to sit anywhere in my house that had any window or anything so that you could see her, because like I said earlier, that my house or my apartment had windows all around, so if you walked around, seeing that it was a very small place, you could see into the living room, see into the kitchen, see into the bedroom. The only place that you couldn't see in was the bathroom. And she wanted to sit in the bathroom.
Do you remember what the weather was like this evening?
It was like windy, and it was winter, so it was cold and windy, and yucky. I mean, I just remember it. She shouldn't have been out there with no clothes on, practically. And so.
Do you recall if you ever previously had told people it was raining?
Excuse me?
Do you recall ever previously telling people that it was raining?
In my recollection, it was raining, but I can't say 100%. But I can remember that it was cold, and she shouldn't have. I thought she shouldn't have been out there, and it was. She could get sick, and.
Okay. What was she wearing?
Just pajamas, like little pajamas, pants, like shorty pants, and shorty sleeves. Yeah, just like a little pajamas, like I didn't even know one wore those, really, but just like a little pajamas.
In general, what do you guys talk about in the bathroom?
That she was crying, and I was trying to calm her down.
Yes.
And that she didn't want to go back inside. And that she was scared. And yeah, that's what I can remember.
After Kathy disappeared, did you ever see her again?
Never.
Did Bob Durst ever come over to your apartment after his wife disappeared, ask you if you'd seen her or where she was?
Never.
Did he ever knock on your door and say, do you have any idea where she is or when?
Never.
You heard from Jim Varian, who was the detective who interviewed the Doyles months later about the incident. He spoke with Ann about it. He said that
Ann let her in, and Catherine stated that Bob had beat her and that he wanted to kill her. She further stated that he had a gun and was afraid of being shot.
you heard from Kathy's sister, Virginia McKeon, who talked about the loving family, how dedicated Kathy was to her family. She was her older sister. They were extremely close. Kathy was excited about becoming a doctor. Kathy never would have voluntarily abandoned her family. She said that Kathy wanted what was due to her. And she was very clear that this is somebody who just would not have taken off voluntarily. You heard from her brother, Jimmy McCormack, her older brother.
You indicated you became aware of a situation with Mr. Durst and Kathy in the mid-'70s that you said changed the relationship. Can you describe how the relationship changed?
Kathy, when she was in a situation, can I describe it?
Sure.
Kathy was forced to have a divorce. I mean, an abortion. Kathy was forced to have an abortion under threat of a divorce. And when that happened, Kathy really just refocused her energies not to maintain the love that she once had for Bob, or to restore it, but to focus it on herself, and not to be selfish that way, but just to take the gifts that she had, the intelligence, the passion to learn, the desire to be there for other people, especially in the healthcare industry. So she completed her pre-med nursing degree to us in Connecticut, and then she segued that to wanting to become a doctor, so she got admitted to Albert Einstein College of Medicine.
Did you notice any change in who Kathy was and her confidence level at the time she met the defendant at 19 versus, for instance, by the time she was graduating from nursing school?
By the time Kathy was graduating from nursing school, she had grown up, grown smarter, and I believe she had grown past intellectually, emotionally, and with a purpose. Kathy had a purpose. She was going to be a caregiver. She was so driven by it. Kathy and Bob's relationship went from, a mutual love to a situation where Bob would control her time. I define the abuse that I've witnessed over time, if I can so speak.
Was Kathy excited? Did she express to you that she was excited about the impending birth of your daughter?
Absolutely, it fell right into her wheelhouse in terms of pediatrician, and we received a tremendous, my wife and I was there when it arrived, received a tremendous rose bouquet.
Let me ask something. Given the relationship that Kathy had with your mom,
Yes.
would Kathy have been aware that had she just taken off, that it would have a devastating effect on your family and your mom in particular?
Oh, I think that's very good to do.
Is there any way, in your opinion, Mr. McCormack, that if your sister were alive, that she would have missed your mom's funeral?
In my opinion, if Kathy was with us, she would have never missed her mom's funeral. No.
And as you sit here today, my last question, any doubt in your mind, Mr. McCormack, that your sister is not alive?
There's no doubt. Kathy's not with us, period.
And any doubt in your mind, Mr. McCormack,
No doubt in my mind.
that she died on January 31st, 1982?
There's no doubt in my mind that she died January 31, 1982.
And the last witness you heard from was Dr. Marion Wadlington, who was Kathy's professor and mentor in nursing school. Like Kathy, Dr. Wadlington had been a nurse and become a doctor, and she described Kathy as an extremely bright and dedicated student. Dr. Wadlington was the one who encouraged Kathy to go to medical school. And Kathy would call Dr. Wadlington late at night, completely distraught over her relationship.
She told me that she had been beaten up by her husband to the point where she had gone to the hospital, and they had taken pictures to document her injuries.
What did you say to her in response?
I was extremely worried for her. She said she wanted to get a divorce. And I was worried that she would be in further danger of being beaten by him and possibly lose her life.
Did you express those concerns to her?
Yes, I did.
And what was her response when you expressed those concerns?
She said, I'm going to leave him soon, but I want to stay for a little longer.
Did she explain to you why?
Yes, she wanted to get paperwork and things like that to justify a proper type of settlement from him in divorce proceedings.
With respect to her husband and the way that she talked to you on the phone about the relationship, did it appear that when it came to her husband and what she was telling you, was she the same strong person that you knew her to be?
I think she was walking tentatively around him because of the violence that was occurring.
When you expressed to her that you were afraid that it might escalate and that she might lose her life, did she say anything to reassure you other than, I need to get these papers, I need to stay?
She said, should anything happen to me, you make sure you don't let the bastard get away with it. At that time, domestic violence was really ascribed to the women, to the woman being at fault.
Your last conversation with Kathy, Do you recall when approximately that would have been?
I think it was somewhere within that last month before she disappeared.
And do you remember you can recall, is that when the comment about don't let the bastard get away with it? Is
That's
that called?
correct. That is correct.
And if I were to ask you, Doctor, how sure are you of that memory?
I'm very certain of those exact words and that memory. And when I saw her picture in the New York Post, that was brought to my attention by the fellow students in her class, I had this sick feeling.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is what the evidence thus far that has been put on has shown. We're going to put on the evidence that we discussed in opening statement. And when this case is over, we will come back to you and we will argue with you and we will tell you and demonstrate to you how we have proven our case. I want to thank you for your time and attention, both the first time around and this time around. I know it has not been easy and I know it's been inconvenient, but again, we're all so appreciative of the sacrifices that you're making to be jurors on this case. Again, thank you very much. And I'll take that extra minute that I have left and apply it for another time later.
Yes, 1 minute in the bank, Mr. Lewin. Thank you for that 1 minute. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think rather than start the defense opening today, it's best that we start fresh tomorrow. I do need to have conversations with, brief conversations, following up with juror number 6, juror number 10, and juror number 22, you're now 19, at least I got those right. And, but everyone else will be excused. We'll start at 9, because we've gotten most of our legal stuff out of the way, hopefully. So remember, do not talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Do not make up your mind about the verdict or any issue until after you've discussed the case with the other jurors during deliberations. No tweeting, no Facebook, or other social media. See you tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. You're excused except for the 3.
You're muted.